The snow came down in sheets, blotting out the moon and smothering the Rockies in silence. A lone trapper huddled beneath a pine, his rifle empty, his tinder soaked through. If the cold didn't kill him, the wolves might. His fingers were numb, but he remembered a trick the old mountain men swore by. Dig into the bark of a pine tree, scrape out that sticky amber resin, and strike a spark. In seconds it flared, spitting black smoke but catching fast. That little flame bought him life for another night. Stories like this aren't just tall tales. The American frontier was a laboratory of necessity. Men and women carved out survival not by luck, but by clever tricks, hacks you might call them, that turned hardship into advantage. And the truth is, a lot of those same frontier hacks could still save you today. Life on the American frontier, from the Appalachian backwoods of the 1700s to the Oregon Trail of the mid-1800s, was brutally unpredictable. You might leave Independence, Missouri with a wagon full of supplies, but one broken axle on the trail could spell disaster. Water that looked fresh could sicken an entire family. A sudden snowstorm could freeze you before sunrise. There were no outdoor stores, no GPS apps, no 911 to call. What you had was your wits, your neighbors, and often the knowledge passed down from Native American guides or hardened long hunters who'd seen the worst the wilderness could offer. Frontier survival wasn't about high-tech gadgets. It was about improvisation. Turning a blanket into 3 different tools, lighting a fire with whatever you had left, making do when the difference between making do and making a mistake was life and death. Today, we'll walk through 10 of those frontier hacks, each one historically rooted in real frontier life, each one still useful if you ever find yourself off the grid, whether it's on a backcountry trail or in a sudden emergency. Let's start with one of the simplest but most life-saving of them all.
Hack number 1. Pine resin as fire starter and wound sealant. Picture a hunting camp in the Rockies around 1830. Snow is hip-deep and the men are damp from wading through a frozen creek. Their powder horns are dry, but their tinderbox is empty. One man, seasoned from years in the mountains, pulls out a hunk of hardened pine sap from a pouch. He chips off a piece, sets it beneath some shavings, and strikes his flint. The resin bursts into flame, hot, smoky, stubborn. Even damp wood begins to hiss and catch. Pine resin, or pitch, was the frontier's all-purpose lifesaver. It's sticky, highly flammable, and filled with antiseptic compounds. Mountain men smeared it on wounds to help stop bleeding and keep infection at bay. If you cut yourself dressing game, a dab of resin could seal the wound until it healed. Why it works? Pine resin contains volatile terpenes that ignite easily, even when damp. It also forms a waterproof seal when it hardens. Modern use? Caught in the rain with no lighter fluid? Look for conifers. Scrape out resin blisters or hardened lumps on the bark. It'll burn like a candle stub. And if you slice your hand with a camp knife, a little resin can work as an emergency bandage until you get proper treatment. Hack number 2. Turning a blanket into a bedroll or poncho. Imagine the long trek west on the Oregon Trail. Space in the wagon is tight. Families often own just 1 or 2 heavy wool blankets, prized as much as gold. But those blankets weren't just for sleep, they were gear. At night, you'd roll your possessions inside, cinch it with leather thongs, and sling it over your shoulder, the classic bindle carried by trappers and soldiers alike. When a storm blew in, you'd slit a hole in the center, drape it over your shoulders, and suddenly you had a poncho. The dense wool kept off rain and snow, and even when wet, it retained warmth. Why it works? Wool fibers trap air pockets, insulating even when damp. The versatility of one piece of fabric meant fewer supplies to haul. Modern use? Backpack too heavy? A wool blanket can still serve as ground cover, sleeping bag, or rain cape in one. In a survival kit, one blanket multiplies into at least 4 tools: shelter, clothing, bedding, and pack. Frontiersmen had a saying: one blanket, one rifle, one knife. Everything else is comfort. Hack number 3. Charcoal and sand filters for water. Water could kill you as quickly as thirst. Diaries from wagon trains mention entire families stricken with dysentery after drinking foul creek water. Native American tribes and seasoned scouts knew a trick: use the earth itself to clean it. The method was simple. Take a hollow log, or even a sock, layer it with coarse sand, gravel, and crushed charcoal from the fire. Pour dirty water through, and out trickled a clearer, better-tasting drink. Why it works? Sand and gravel strain out grit and debris, while charcoal absorbs impurities and odors. It won't remove all pathogens, boiling was still needed, but it drastically improved taste and reduced visible filth. Frontier example? On the Santa Fe Trail, traders often dug shallow holes near riverbanks. As water seeped in through sand and silt, it filtered naturally, producing cleaner drinking water than the muddy river itself. Modern use? Lost in the woods with only a stream? A makeshift sand and charcoal filter can buy you time until you can boil or treat the water. Campers today still use this method as a backup to purification tablets. Hack number 4. Animal fat for candles, soap, or waterproofing. After a successful buffalo hunt, the meat fed the camp, but the fat was just as precious. Frontier families rendered tallow from beef or deer, using it to dip candles that lit their cabins through long winters. Mixed with wood ash, that same fat became soap, scrubbing away grime when supplies ran out. Hunters rubbed grease on leather boots and coats, waterproofing them against snow. Why it works? Animal fat is dense, slow-burning fuel. Combined with lye, from hardwood ash, it undergoes saponification, producing soap. As a coating, it seals pores in leather and cloth, shedding water. Historical note: during the Civil War, shortages made homemade tallow candles and soap essential on both sides. On the frontier, nothing from an animal went to waste. Modern use? Out camping with no lantern batteries? Look for bacon grease or suet. Melt it, pour it into a tin with a cloth wick, and you've got a crude but effective candle. Rub a little fat into boots to keep them from soaking through. In survival, waste not is more than a saying. It's policy. Hack number 5. Carving snowshoes or a travois from wood and rawhide. Picture a fur trapper in the Rockies, winter closing in fast. Waist-deep snow makes every step torture. He cuts flexible willow branches, bends them into hoops, lashes them with strips of rawhide, and creates crude snowshoes. With them, he can cross drifts that would otherwise bury him. Or imagine a Lakota family moving camp. They lash lodge poles to a horse's flanks, trailing behind like giant sled runners. Across these poles, they stretch rawhide thongs to carry belongings or even small children. This was the travois, a simple but ingenious load hauler. Why it works? Snowshoes spread weight across a larger surface area, preventing deep sinking. The travois uses leverage and drag to carry loads without wheels, perfect for rough or snowy terrain. Modern use? Break a leg in the backcountry? A travois lashed together with poles and cordage can haul an injured companion. Lost in deep snow without gear? Quick-made snowshoes from saplings can mean the difference between progress and exhaustion. Frontier life demanded mobility, and mobility meant invention. Hack number 6. Starting fires with gunpowder and flint. Picture this: a party of scouts in the 1840s riding the high plains. A storm has left everything soaked: grass, tinder, even their saddle blankets. Without fire, they can't dry out, and without drying out, hypothermia is just hours away. One rider pulls a horn of black powder from his saddlebag. He pours a little mound on a scrap of cloth, strikes flint against steel, and whoomph, the powder flares, catching the cloth,
and sparking a stubborn fire in spite of the damp. Why it works? Black powder, used in muzzle-loading rifles, is highly combustible. A pinch ignites easily and burns hot enough to dry and catch wetter material. Frontier context? Hunters, soldiers, and trappers often carried powder horns not just for shooting, but as insurance against a cold camp. Journals from the Lewis and Clark expedition note that powder had to be carefully dried after river crossings, but in emergencies, it was worth its weight in gold. Modern use? If you're carrying modern ammunition in the backcountry, a last-ditch option is carefully removing powder from a cartridge to start a fire. Dangerous? Absolutely. But in a true survival scenario, it could save your life the same way it saved frontiersmen's. Hack number 7. Willow bark tea for pain relief. A wagon train rolls across the Platte River Valley. One of the men twists his ankle, swollen, throbbing, impossible to walk on. With no pharmacy in sight, they turn to local knowledge. A Pawnee guide strips bark from a willow branch, boils it into a bitter tea, and has the man sip it. Within hours, the pain eases. Why it works? Willow bark contains salicin, a natural compound the body converts into salicylic acid, the chemical ancestor of modern aspirin. It reduces pain and inflammation. Historical note: Native American tribes across North America used willow bark as medicine. Early settlers adopted the practice, relying on it for headaches, fevers, and sore muscles. By the late 1800s, chemists isolated salicylic acid, paving the way for aspirin tablets. Modern use? If stranded and injured, knowing which trees offer natural relief could buy you comfort and mobility until help arrives. Just be cautious. Dosages are hard to judge, and not every bark is safe to drink. Still, the principle remains. The forest was the frontier's pharmacy. Hack number 9. Making cordage from plant fibers or strips of hide. On the frontier, rope was life. You needed it for tying down wagon loads, building shelters, setting traps, or hauling game. But rope frays, breaks, or gets left behind. The solution? Make more. How it was done? Strips of rawhide twisted and dried formed rawhide cordage, stiff but strong. From plants, fibers like dogbane, nettle, or even strips of inner bark were twisted into twine. The technique was simple. Roll 2 strands against your thigh, twisting them opposite ways so they lock together. Why it works? Twisting fibers in opposite directions balances tension, creating a rope far stronger than the sum of its parts. Historical examples? Archaeological finds show Native Americans used cordage for nets, fishing lines, and snares long before settlers arrived. Pioneers quickly learned the same methods when wagon ropes snapped or leather thongs wore thin. Modern use? Break a shoelace on a long hike? Strip fibers from plants or use clothing threads to twist emergency cordage. Need to lash poles for a shelter? Bark fibers or even plastic strips can be braided the same way. Rope making is one of those skills that hasn't aged a day.
Hack number 9. Improvising fishing lines and hooks from bones or thorns. Food shortages haunted frontier life. Diaries from the Donner Party and countless wagon trains describe dwindling supplies. Hunting wasn't always possible, but streams and lakes offered fish if you had the gear. When settlers lacked metal hooks, they improvised. A sliver of bone, notched at both ends, could be tied in the middle and baited. Swallowed sideways, it snagged in the fish's throat, the gorge hook. In wooded regions, settlers or native fishermen used sharp thorns, bent into hooks and tied to cordage. Why it works? Bone is durable and can be sharpened to a fine point. Fish, driven by hunger, don't care if the hook is iron or bone, only that the bait looks appetizing. Modern use? Break your fishing kit on a camping trip? Bone fragments, safety pins, or even paper clips can become emergency hooks. Nature provides bait, and ingenuity provides the rest. Frontier saying, where there's water, there's food, if you've got the patience to make a hook. Hack number 10. using reflective tin plates or mirrors to signal. Out on the high plains, visibility stretched for miles, but shouting or riding took too long. Pioneers and scouts sometimes used the glint of tin plates or small mirrors to flash signals across distance. A soldier on campaign could reflect sunlight to catch the eye of comrades half a mile away. Native scouts, too, used reflective stones or polished metal for communication. Why it works? Light travels farther than sound and doesn't require energy. Even a small flash on a sunny day can be seen for astonishing distances. Historical note: by the mid-1800s, the U.S. Army Signal Corps began experimenting with mirrors, leading to the heliograph, essentially a refined version of the frontier trick. But settlers had already been using the same principle with camp plates and pocket mirrors. Modern use? Lost in the wilderness? A signal mirror or even a shiny phone screen can attract rescuers miles away. Survival guides today rank reflective signaling as one of the most effective ways to be spotted from the air. What do these hacks tell us? That frontier life was built on improvisation. Settlers, soldiers, trappers, and native guides didn't always have the right gear, but they always had resourcefulness. A blanket became 3 tools. A handful of resin became both medicine and fire. A broken bone turned into a fishing hook. These weren't luxuries. They were the difference between eating or starving, staying warm or freezing, living or dying. And remarkably, many of these same tricks echo in today's survival manuals. The Boy Scouts teach water filtration with sand and charcoal. Wilderness first aid guides mention willow bark as pain relief. Backpackers still rely on wool blankets, cordage, and signal mirrors. Technology changes, but the principle doesn't. Survival isn't about what you own, it's about what you know. The American frontier was unforgiving. Every storm, every river crossing, every broken wagon wheel tested human limits. But the people who braved it carried more than rifles and axes. They carried a toolbox of clever, life-saving hacks. Today, whether you're deep in the backcountry or facing a sudden emergency, those same old tricks can still tip the scales between danger and safety. Because survival, then and now, isn't about high-tech gear. It's about resilience, ingenuity, and the wisdom of those who came before us. Stick around for our next video, Frontier First Aid, Old Remedies and Survival Medicine. We'll dig deeper into the cures, concoctions, and treatments pioneers swore by, some surprisingly effective, others maybe not so much. Until then, remember, every tool you need might already be in your pocket or hiding in the land around you, just like it was for the frontiersmen who paved the way.